Hey guys, I'm Jacob. You are watching the Prepper's Bunker Outdoors. Today I am comparing four very sick knives. You're watching the battle of the big belt knives. I've got a lot of stuff that I'm excited to show you, but really quick, let me explain what I mean by battle of the big belt knives. These knives have a blade somewhere near 7 inches. It's considered to be large for a belt knife, but it's kind of in between what the standard belt knife would be with about a 5-inch blade and what would get into what you would consider a chopper. I don't consider any of these knives choppers. That usually starts around the 8 to 9 inch range. There is a slight exception here, but that is the reason for the name of the video, because these knives are kind of in an in-between area. Now with that being said, we're comparing the Hogue EX F01, the Bear Forest Knives Wood Butcher, the Sheath handmade Polish tracker prototype, and the White River Knife and Tool FC7. These are big belt knives. I'm going to have a number 2 to this video series where I compare another set of belt knives that are just slightly bigger. And the reason that I've separated them is because the blades that are slightly bigger are quite a bit different when it comes to weight and overall length, to a point where they're less comparable. These four blades are very comparable in intended use, length, weight, the whole 9 yards, and that's why we're starting out with these ones. We're just about to get into it, but let me just say, if you enjoy this content, please check out the description box below. I have 2 businesses. I hand make custom rifle slings, and I also own my own knife brand. The links to those, Beach and Tactical and Exodus Knife and Tool, are in the description box below, along with my Patreon, my social media links, and my affiliate links. So if you like what you see, please check them out. Also, I know you guys are going to ask, this shirt, this 1776 shirt, is from Stand Strong Art. I want to get that out of the way. They are fantastic. I'll go ahead and put a link to him in the description box below, so that, Lord willing, I don't have to answer that question 350 times in the comment section. So the first thing that I want to discuss with you is fit and finish. And we'll just go down the line here. All of these knives have absolutely fantastic fit and finish. A couple of them do stand out. We'll start with the Hogue EX F01. It is an incredibly well thought out and manufactured and finished combat knife from Hogue, designed by Alan Elishewitz. If I murdered your name, Alan, I apologize. It has a Cerakote finish. This finish is incredibly tough, beautifully manufactured handle scales, some of the best in the game. I won't talk about how comfortable it is because we're going to save that for a little bit later. But one thing that I like and dislike is that they include a tool for removing your handle screws in the handle. All right, so we're talking about fit and finish. It's one of those things where if you don't do it, it won't count against you, but if you do it, it will. So as far as fit and finish, if they didn't include the tool, I wouldn't grade a tool, right? But they did, so I have to. The tool is a little difficult to get out. That's fine. I'm not even going to sit here and screw with it right now. However, what I will say is that if you're going to have a combat knife in cool colors like this, it should be finished black. I get that it's a freebie, but it seems out of place being reflective there. Even the hardware is blacked out, so I feel like the tool itself, that little Torx key, should be blacked out. But more importantly than that, it breaks. Tightening and loosening the bolts. This is my second one. I sent it out to Garrett, American Bushcraft, a buddy of mine, and he messed this one up. They are not very good quality tools. So it's cool that you gave us a freebie, but the freebie is not up to par with the rest of the knife, and maybe we need a different tool here. These Torx screws are very small. I don't know the size off the top of my head, sue me, but they're like a folding knife size deal, and I think probably if we had a larger screw on here or screw head, we could have a tougher tool without increasing quality necessarily. But it's very well thought out, and I'm very excited about this knife. Fit and finish, I would grade this as premium production, no questions asked. It's very nice. Next up, we have a whole different thing here. We're going production, custom, production, custom. We have the Wood Butcher from Bear Forest Knives, this absolute tank of a Bowie. Fit and finish is very good, nice rounded edges, everything is very comfortable. This knife has been used quite a bit, as you can probably guess from the finish. You've got slight grind lines, but they're not the type of grind lines, in my opinion, that would be equated to poor fit and finish. I think that they go with the aesthetic, and they're fantastic. Really no issues on fit and finish. You know, everything's flush, everything's nice. However, you do look at this knife and you can tell that this is a handmade knife. I don't think anybody necessarily puts that as a minus, but your fit and finish on this knife, where it's going to be the most different from your production knives, is knife to knife fit and finish. This one is made by hand. This one might be just slightly different than the one that you get. Maybe it won't be, but that is going to be a little differentiating factor. Next up, the White River Knife and Tool FC7. This one actually has some edge damage on it, and that is from the absolute hardest type of testing you can possibly do, which is letting people borrow your knife. I actually did a survival class. I taught over 200 people at Tactical Response basic fire making skills. It was a great time. I lent out my own knives, and we have some slight edge damage that I don't even think showed up on the screen there. I still wish I would have fixed it before the video. It's not the knife's fault at all. However, fit and finish on the White River Knife and Tool FC5 is beyond, in my opinion, premium production. We're talking about, this thing is like a full premium custom. The finish across the board, borderline mirror finish from the factory, every single knife, perfect consistency, amazing kydex, which we'll talk about sheaths in just a moment, no square edges, no hot spots, no issues, no gaps. What a beautifully manufactured tool. There is not, I don't think that there is a single standard level custom maker out there that would not be envious of this fit and finish. Even the bow drill divot there, it's actually a separate piece. It's absolutely beautiful. So in all transparency, White River Knife and Tool is the manufacturer that I selected to manufacture my own knives, right? So take that into consideration. However, I gave them Manufacturer of the Year at Blade Show 1 or 2 years before I was able to get them on board with my own brand. And If what you see with your own eyes or what you're hearing from my mouth doesn't say it, look in the comment section, look at any other video. I don't think you will ever find anybody say anything except that White River Knives fit and finish and quality is absolutely at the top of the game. So, I have to give you the disclaimer, but seriously guys, top of the game. And then another custom knife. This is the Polish Tracker from Michael Sheath. Obviously made in Poland. Maybe not obviously, he could be Polish in America, but made in Poland. And essentially this is like his crusher model knife with a quarter round added to the rear instead of the front. I love this design concept because the reason that I'm not a big fan of trackers is I don't like having a broken edge. I like being able to use my entire edge for whatever task it is that I'm doing, and I often do use my entire edge. So having the quarter round there does have benefits for some curls and some shaping and some other stuff, but it has too many detriments for me. He put it on the back so it doesn't get in my way. I love the concept once again, and what has always amazed me about Sheath Handmade is his fit and finish. It is beautiful. Just amazing. So, that's fit and finish on all of these guys. Now, let me go back really quick. Part of fit and finish is the sheath, right? So, the Hogue is the only one that comes with a nylon sheath. I don't normally like nylon sheaths. They're not one-hand secure, one-hand removable. However, this is the nicest nylon sheath I've ever had. It's very modular. You've got MOLLE slots here. You've got MOLLE slots and a belt loop up here. You've got MOLLE on the front for a survival pouch. Technically, this knife would not be jump capable. To be jump capable, you should have 2 methods of retention, and the plastic sleeve in here is not a method of retention. So technically, you only have 1 method of retention, which is this strap here. However, I would jump with it with no questions. And we are talking about being airborne, by the way, for if you didn't know or if you didn't care or do care or whatever. Absolutely fantastic. Now, if this were Kydex with this strap, then it would be jump capable. But very nice. Probably not quite on par with our other knives here. The Wood Butcher's Kydex sheath is nice. We have a nylon belt loop here. And you slide your knife in like so. This does not have a super positive click in or out for retention. I would not wear this upside down. It could definitely pop out if you were to wear it upside down. However, wearing it on the belt, I would have no concerns about it popping out. Once again, this is not a jump capable sheath. We only have 1 method of retention. That is the Kydex itself. You need a second level of retention to be jump capable. All right, the White River, and I'm sitting here talking about jump capable. None of the knives are jump capable. Let me just get that out of the way now. All 1 method of retention. The White River knife and tool sheath, actually probably the nicest sheath of the bunch. Very nice click on the way in. Nice positive pop on the way out. We have a belt loop here, but we also have modular hole spacing and webbing slots all the way along it, as well as a strap on the bottom here, a slot for a strap on the bottom. We do have a drainage hole there. So this sheath is something that you could send your knife into a custom sheath maker and pay between $80 and $150 to get, maybe $200 to get. It comes with the knife, comes with a ferro rod and a ferro rod loop. I believe they still do. They are in the Firecraft line. You'd have to look for yourself in the pictures to see if they still do, but I'm basically positive they still do. We've got leather dangler here, and it rides nice, guys. This is the nicest sheath out of the group, and it's saying so much to be on a production knife. And when I started getting into knives, that didn't exist. That was not a thing, like, at all. Finally, we've got the Polish tracker. Check that out. Oh, that's nice. And then on the way out, very nice. Very good retention. The best retention out of the bunch. Now, I did say the White River knife and tool sheath I thought was overall the best. That's not because of the Kydex quality. This knife is a difficult knife to design to be good with Kydex, and this is custom. I can't believe he did such a good job on a custom sheath for this knife. But because you have the quarter round on the back, he had to add these details and stuff in here to make the draw nice. But sometimes if you do your draw just a little bit off, it can catch just slightly. That might be part of the design. Maybe if this goes from being custom to one of his production models, that will be fixed. I would still say that this is a sheath that you'd pay $80 to $150 for. It is incredibly nice, and it comes with these loops for scout carry, as well as these loops for normal belt carrier. This is his own modular system that he came up with here. I have a ferro rod set up with an SE ferro rod on the back. This is an Armatis Carry Solutions custom Kydex holster for the ferro rod with an ulti clip on it. I don't know if I should have said that the White River knife and tool sheath is the nicest of the bunch, because man, is this sheath fantastically good. So I don't know. You judge them as you will. All right, I'm going to try and talk quickly about chopping performance. I just said these knives aren't choppers. I will stand by that. But if you have to do some chopping, any of these knives can do a bit. But if you have to do serious chopping, you're talking about a big caloric investment, okay? But chopping does give us a good way to get shock and vibration through the handle and to talk to us about edge geometry and handle geometry. So we'll get started with the Hogue here. And the Hogue can zip through some wood just like all the others can, some thin branches, some soft stuff. Once again, if you're doing heavy chopping, the handle's very thin, and you don't have a lot of forward weight. You don't have a lot of power to sink this thing in. And the edge geometry is the thickest of the bunch. This sucker's made stout. It's not going to show you the edge geometry-ish. So, not very efficient for chopping, for heavy-duty stuff. If you've really got to put it to task and do some chopping and stuff like that, you're going to feel it in your hand, your arm, your wrist. You're going to get a good bit of shock and vibration. The handle that just locks in so nicely for everything else will start to beat you up a little bit. But again, none of these knives, in my opinion, are choppers. So that's what you're going to get for the most part across the board. This one just lags a little bit behind the others because of a lack of forward weight in that blade and a somewhat thick edge. The only knife that can blur the line, in my opinion, between a big belt knife and a chopper of this group is the Wood Butcher. Same general size and weight of the other knives, but you've got more weight forward with this nice big belly and a lot of meat on the blade back there, and then a lot less meat in the handle here until you've got this big round pommel. And so that really allows you to let the knife do the work while that pommel just holds it in your hand. You don't have to grip the crap out of it. People, you know, they'll come out when they're first starting to use a knife. They want a lanyard, they want security. These are good things. I'm not saying they're bad things, but they grip the crap out of their knife, and it's not effective. If you can let the knife play in your hands, you can do a lot more chopping, a lot more efficiently, and with a lot less fatigue. So between the shape of the handle and the weight distribution on here, the Wood Butcher is the best chopper out of the group for heavy duty chopping. It's still going to be a huge caloric investment. I still don't really recommend it. I would not go out, you know, on a hike. If I had to go out on a hike and it was just planned to be a day hike and this is the only cutting implement that I have on me, and for some reason I decide I'm going to stay out all night and I find myself in a lowland where to get to good dry wood, I have to do a good bit of chopping. This is the knife I'd pick out of these four, but man, I would still really be wishing for a larger knife, a machete, or an axe. So with that being said, we will move on to the White River Knife and Tool Firecraft 7. This knife handles very uniquely out of this group. It's the lightest knife. It's by far the lightest weight in hand. It's got the thinnest edge, and it will sail through some wood. Again, we're talking about fine stuff, fairly narrow wood, fairly soft. It sails through. It feels like you're using a machete because you get that beautiful little tick, and it just slices right through like a laser blade when it does. When it comes to heavier chopping, it performs better than it should for its weight because of that edge thickness. It bites deeper than you would think it would. But again, if you're doing a little bit bigger stuff, maybe even just wrist size, and it's dry, seasoned wood, oak, even maple, even cedar sometimes. Some people don't understand. You get through that nice soft white layer of cedar, and you get into the purple heart of it, and it's dry and hard. That crap can be hard. Once again, you are going to be a little bit beat up, and the retention is actually quite good with this little knob right here, but not quite good enough to let the knife do its own thing in hand like the Wood Butcher. But once again, for a 10-ounce knife, this is the same weight as a fairly typical belt knife. It performs so much better than it should. It's kind of amazing. All right, and the Polish Tracker. You know, as a chopper, once again, it does pretty well. This pommel shape is quite good for letting the knife move in your hands while chopping. Again, not quite as good as the Wood Butcher. This is probably your second best chopping option. The edge geometry is very, very thin. It's beautiful. You've got not as much weight forward, but a little bit more due to the shape of the blade. You've got this full width section up here at the tip in front of this light grind, and the shape of the edge right in the sweet spot where you're chopping, when you're getting in the sweet spot, it can do some work. Again, not a chopper, probably the second best out of the bunch, and it's a good deal. The handle geometry is fantastic. The edge geometry is fantastic. The Hogue EX F01 while batoning. The handle can beat up your hand a little bit. Most people wouldn't think that handle geometry matters while batoning. I think it does to some degree. It's not as big of a deal. If I have to do a bunch of batoning like at the house or something like that, I do actually like to have a pair of gloves because I can beat the crap out of my hand. This becomes a fulcrum. You're smashing the tip, the handle comes up. There's actually quite a bit of shock going on here. The Hogue batons fantastically. Probably in a lot of scenarios the best out of the group. It has a relatively thick edge, the thickest edge out of this group for sure. Also, it's a saber grind that's not very high, and people get edge geometry, I think, a little bit wrong when they talk about batoning, generally saying that the saber grind performs better than a full flat, etc. What really helps a knife perform when batoning is edge thickness. What creates the most friction is not the type of primary grind that you have, but whether or not your edge is twisting and conforming to the wood. This edge will not twist and conform to the wood, therefore you have lower friction, it pops it out. However, with the thicker edge geometry, it can be a little harder to get started. And if you're batoning wood that doesn't necessarily, that isn't super hard or twisty, you kind of lose that benefit, and it can become more difficult actually to baton, because where this is better at cracking open that really hard twisted wood, if you have relatively straight grain, the knives with the thinner edges are going to go through easier. Wood Butcher has just phenomenal handle geometry for this task. With your really difficult batoning, which, guys, it doesn't make sense to do in any kind of survival or practical environment to be batoning the really difficult twisted stuff. I do realize that, but I have to test it. Because you do have what I would call a medium thickness, a good all-around edge thickness, and a relatively high grind. On the really heavy stuff, I did get a little bit of bending while the knife was going through, and that caused a lot of friction and a lot of sticking. But the handle geometry is good. The back of the handle is nice and rounded. It's nice and wide. It is comfortable to use. The shape of the tip when you're beating on it can cause the knife to glance a little bit, but let's not be silly here. It does a good job, and the geometry is great, and for anything that you should be batoning through, the Wood Butcher does a fantastic job. Now, when the next two knives are very similar, when you are batoning with the White River FC5, actually, even in a lot of our twisted wood, this thing was able to lightsaber through it surprisingly well. At one point, I got into some really gnarly oak, actually with the Wood Butcher and with this knife, that actually had the edges twisting and the knives bending enough that I decided that I was going to cut the testing there because this is not a destruction test. With that being said, it came back perfectly true. And I'm very surprised at the toughness that White River Knife and Tool gets out of their S35VN. No dullness whatsoever. Edge geometry is great, like I said. But for your very hard use batoning, the Hogue's going to be better. For basically everything else, this was one of the best. Which brings us to actually the Polish Tracker. So this is a little bit difficult. I'm actually working with Michael Shagat on this design, trying to test it out. And this is the second prototype that I've received and tested hard. And so, oddly enough, I just talked all of that time about the thicker edge and this and that and the other. This knife split through twisted oak easier than any of the other knives. It was too easy. So okay, handle geometry is great, nice and rounded here, not as much shock transmitted to the handle. Perfect. This is exactly what the type of tip that I want to see when I'm batoning. I think part of the reason, however, that this knife did so well through the twisted seasoned oak is because when it bent, it didn't have as much friction or resistance. It didn't have as much resistance because it wasn't creating as much friction, because the knife actually bent. So it actually twisted, I shouldn't say bent. So for our next iteration on this blade, if Michael chooses to do so, you see that we lose all of the full stock thickness through right here, and it's actually quite thin right here. And so it sailed through the wood. I couldn't believe it, but it's going to be impossible to show here. But it is twisted at the point there, and so that's not necessarily, actually that's not at all a ding on his quality. This design just needs another proto. Let me just say, guys, a lot of people are going to be poo-pooing what I'm saying here in this video. Choose a knife maker who is sending knives to hard users like me to get feedback. Just seriously, you can't replicate some of this stuff. And I absolutely love this knife. However, we do need to make sure in the next version, or Michael, I would suggest, would make sure if this knife goes into full production, which it is not, that we find a way to keep the maximum stock thickness at some point in the blade despite the quarter round. Other than that, handle geometry is dialed. So, wow, that was a lot of stuff. Let me just get into final thoughts for anybody who is still watching this video, because it's become a very long video. So I'm going to just talk quickly about each of these knives and what they're best for. I want to say that any of these knives for the intended use of anything between a soldier looking for a belt knife to a woodsman to a survivalist, any of these knives will fill the same role incredibly well, but they all have something that they're kind of the best at. I would say that the Hogue for a traditional soldier is the best combat knife. That thicker edge is going to lend itself well to a soldier who abuses his knife. And so people say that I am disrespecting soldiers or something silly like that when I say this. That's because they've never been soldiers, and I have been a soldier deployed with soldiers. So I can tell you what they do. They beat the piss out of their knives. They're not knife people. They don't know crap about knives. I don't think I ever met an actual knife person while in the military. So they beat the snot out of their knives. And so if I was going to hand somebody something that they were going to primarily open MREs with, maybe make some tent stakes with, but generally soldiers are prying stuff and cutting stuff that's not supposed to be cut and stuff like that, I would go with the Hogue. The thicker edge is going to make it feel dull quicker, make it a little bit harder to sharpen back to a razor edge like it comes with. It comes with a fantastic edge. But guys, this is the knife, 1/4 inch thick, A2, thicker edge. It's a beefcake. The Wood Butcher, as it stands, is probably the all-around knife of the group. It's the best chopper if you want your belt knife to be able to do that. So it didn't really stand out in any one way, except for it was the best chopper, partially due to the weight, partially due to the handle. And also, if you want something affordable and custom, it's very personal. You want specific handle colors that he does, or maybe he could even do you one custom. I don't know if his books are open for that or not. But it's a very good all-around knife with more emphasis on chopping. The Firecraft FC5 is the lightest knife of the bunch. Literally, you can take your normal 5-inch belt knife probably off, depending on who you are or what you carry, replace it with this, and on the hip, not know the difference. And the amount of capability difference between this knife and a belt knife for the weight is drastically different, more so than compared to any of these other knives. It's really, really good. This might be one of my favorite all-around production knives of all time, or favorite all-around knife designs of all time. The design is so practical, and at the end of the day, I keep talking about the weight. When you look at 10 ounces of weight, the sum of the parts is more than the whole. Like it's amazing. I just screwed up that saying, but you know what I mean. Whatever. Now the Sheath Polish tracker here, little bit more weight than the FC 7. However, I think that this knife has potential to be the best all-around knife of the group. It's not as stabby. Guys, combat knives are not fighting knives. So keep that in mind. So the Hogue could potentially have some kind of benefit as a fighting knife. Maybe the Wood Butcher could as well. Whatever. But the balance of capabilities of this knife is amazing. We just got to get the design finalized. I'm so excited for Michael. I'm so impressed with his fit and finish and quality. The knife is just a home run. Except for the fact that we've got to go back to the books on the design a little bit and add a little bit more toughness. And it's not for lack of materials used. ADCRV2 is one of the toughest steels on the market, guys. So with that being said, if he keeps an ADCRV2, if we can just keep a little bit more stock thickness through the center, just one little part here, then we won't have any twisting issues, and we will have a real gem. The downside is, and it's a downside potentially with most of what we've got here, He's a single guy making knives. He does really nice fit and finish. It can be hard to get one from him. They're coming from Poland. So if you wanted one, once they're in production, or if you want a different knife, you could get his crusher. If you don't care about the quarter round, get his crusher. He's got other knife models that have full thickness that would never fail out here, right? But get on his mailing list and be quick on the draw, because this is not, this and the Wood Butcher especially are not going to be instant gratitude knives. They're not going to be knives where you're like, I want it, I'm excited about it, I click it, I buy it, it's in the cart, it's in at my house in 2 days. It's not like that. It's a little bit more dedication, but that's what comes with custom knives. Again, same with the Wood Butcher. I think that Garrett at Bear Forest Knives has more volume than Michael in Poland. So it'd probably be a little bit easier to get something from him. But still, if he doesn't have it in stock, it's not going to be a click, buy, receive type deal. That's what I've got, guys. You know, when it comes to, I guess let's talk about a ferro rod. At the top of the game is the FC7. Nothing throws sparks like a Firecraft knife, basically. If you've got the right size ferro rod for the ferro rod notch, you have a lot of surface there. It basically just throws fire out. And the rest of this spine is square as well. I have had a lot of luck with Bear Forest knives for throwing sparks in the past, but I think I rounded this edge from abuse, so it wasn't working. It wasn't throwing sparks for me. Need to get that sharpened up. The Hogue doesn't have anything for a ferro rod, and the Polish Tracker is probably sharp enough to here, but I wouldn't want to pull a ferro rod across a live edge here. So I would probably just use the live edge. I don't like using your main edge for a ferro rod. You will mess it up, but for a secondary edge, I wouldn't mind doing that. And yeah, it's gonna literally carve that ferro rod into some fire. But there you go, guys. I'm going to give you a quick sneak peek at our next lineup. I don't know if another knife will be added to this lineup or not. I'm not exactly sure when I'll get to that video. But that is what I've got for today. If you enjoyed this overly in-depth knife comparison, let me know in the comment section below. Again, check out that description box below. At the very bottom of the description box, you have links to how you can support me. At the top of the description box, I'll put a link to Shigat Handmade and Bear Forest Knives. Hogue and White River Knife and Tools, too easy to find. Google it. They're both available through a slew of retailers. Whatever. You'll see what's in there when you go there. Thank you for watching. I hope that you have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you in the comments section.